In a 1917 National Geographic article, Alexander Graham Bell once remarked, "Alcohol can be manufactured from corn stalks and in fact from almost any vegetable matter capable of fermentation." Today's transportation fuel is much more than petroleum products made from foreign and domestic oil. A new generation of transportation fuel comes in the form of renewable fuels made from corn and cellulosic biomass. Ethanol, also known as ethyl alcohol, represents a small percentage of American transportation fuel. The USDA reports on its website titled Bioenergy Background that ethanol blends reached 8% in the U.S. in 2009. Most people don't realize that all cars use ethanol. Much of the flex fuel craze tied renewable fuels like ethanol to only certain manufactured vehicles. This left people with the assumption that only certain cars and trucks can use ethanol. In fact, if you look inside your tank today, there's a greater possibility that your car is running on renewable ethanol than your right rear tire is running low on air. For 5 years, I have worked in the ethanol industry in over 7 ethanol plants across the country. I currently help manage ethanol production for Poet Biorefining, the world's largest ethanol producer. Many of these plants are close to your home, but most people don't understand what ethanol is or how it's made. In the next few minutes, I would like to inform you of how ethanol is made, where it is used, and what some of the benefits are to our economy. Most ethanol in the U.S. is made from non-edible number 2 yellow corn. Yep, you heard me right, non-edible corn. Humans do not consume number 2 yellow corn. This is good because ethanol production does not take away from food production. Joe Kelsey, director of the Indiana Department of Agriculture, says in an Indianapolis Star article published on May 12, 2011, it is the number 2 yellow corn intended for feedstock or ethanol, not the niblets in the grocery store. The World Agricultural Outlook Board, in its June 9, 2011 World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates, suggest that the biggest consumer of corn in the U.S. is intended for livestock. The corn ethanol industry consumes 104 metric tons of corn in the U.S. Much of the U.S. corn is still exported out of the country. This suggests that there is plenty of supply of renewable fuels for food production. The first step in the ethanol process is taking in the corn. A typical ethanol plant will take in 3 million bushels of corn per year. This equates to about 600,000 bushels per week or 100,000 bushels per day. To put this into perspective, a typical plant will consume about 20,000 acres of corn per year. This is equal to the size of a typical county, but typically plants pull corn from half a dozen counties in the surrounding areas. Once the corn is offloaded, it is stored in grain bins or silos. A typical plant will store about 10 to 20 days worth of corn on site. Corn is moved through augers and conveyors to a milling facility where the corn is ground into a flour. This grinding process exposes starch, which represents about 90% of the corn seed. The other 10% is allowed to flow through the ethanol process, but is dried, stored, and later sold as livestock feed. Once the corn is milled, it is mixed with water to create a slurry. This slurry looks very similar to oatmeal or pancake batter. Enzymes and yeast are added to turn the complex starch molecules into simple sugars. This process is known as fermentation and takes approximately 50 to 60 hours. The yeast consume the sugar during fermentation. Yeast produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. As a result, we now have corn solids, water, and alcohol. This mixture is known as beer mash. The carbon dioxide is allowed to evaporate and later captured and used in CO2 processing for beverage bottling, dry ice manufacturing, and underground sequestration. The ethanol and water mixture is refined in a distillation process. Ethanol and water evaporate at different temperatures. This process separates the ethanol from the water. The ethanol is transferred to a storage tank to be shipped out to fuel blenders. Ethanol is transported by truck and rail. The remaining solids and water are sent to a drying process where livestock feed is produced. The livestock feed is known as DDGS, or dry distiller grains with solubles. These grains are stored and shipped to livestock facilities across the country. Much of today's fuel, ethanol, is made from the process I just described. Corn is simply ground into flour. Water, enzymes, and yeast are added to a mixture and allowed to ferment. The distillation process separates the solids and the liquids. Ethanol is stored and transported to fuel blenders. The remaining solids are dried and shipped to feed livestock. In 1925, Henry Ford tells the New York Times, "The fuel of the future is going to come from fruit like the sumac out by the road, or from apples, weeds, sawdust, almost anything, any vegetable matter that is fermented." Today we use ethanol to substitute our dependence on foreign oil. Ethanol also burns cleaner and is good for the environment. In the same 1917 National Geographic article, Alexander Graham Bell concluded his remarks by saying, "We never need fear of the exhaustion of our present fuel supply, so long as we can produce an annual crop of alcohol to any extent desired." So, the next time you fill up on gas, remember that ethanol is renewable and it is made cleaner and cheaper than other man-made fuels.